Welcome back, folks, to Thrive and Aligned Healing Podcast. I believe this is episode 134. So I just want to take the conversation of hormones and immune system just a little bit further, I guess, one step further, because when the biggest contrast with our hormones is often when women become pregnant after delivery in the postpartum time. So I'm specifically going to talk about postpartum in this episode, and it's because it really highlights the changes that can happen in our immune system and can kind of tip the scales towards autoimmunity or change if we have an autoimmune condition before we're pregnant. And so oftentimes, so when we are pregnant, right, our body is making tons of progesterone and estrogen because it's trying to maintain, right, the embryo in the uterus. And so after delivery, after that baby is born, we no longer need these what we call super physiologic levels of estrogen and progesterone. So oftentimes it's twice as much estrogen and progesterone as what our body requires or needs because we're trying to grow a human being. So when we after labor and delivery, we have this huge, it's like a cliff. We have this huge drop off. It does set us up for a lot of things. And specifically, I want to talk about thyroid problems, especially around postpartum, because this is something that we see very often, and it's not always addressed. And so there's a lot of changes that happen with postpartum, especially around mood and anxiety. There's an estimate that about 30% of women postpartum will experience chronic anxiety or mood disorders. Now, we do expect some short-term things like baby blues within the first 3 days. Everybody will experience mood changes because of that cliff, that change of hormones so drastic that occurs. So that part we consider normal. But long term, after that first week, if we're still experiencing changes, I'm going to encourage you to reach out to somebody to be able to help kind of walk you through that. Now, this may happen like I said, 30% of moms. So it may not happen with a first baby or first 3 babies, but it might happen with a fourth baby. So everybody's a little bit different, right? So I encourage you to be aware of that. I feel like we can't have a discussion about postpartum without talking about mood and anxiety changes. But what I really want to focus on this podcast is about the thyroid. Okay. This occurs about 25% of moms postpartum. Then of that, about 25%, this can become a long-term autoimmune condition. So this is something we call a thyroiditis, where our thyroid becomes inflamed. And we kind of get the perfect storm in pregnancy. And sometimes some of those symptoms can be a little bit masked by our hormones. And so sometimes, we don't always recognize that the thyroid is what is changing. And so I just want to share this information to kind of bring it to your attention today. So when we have that drop off of hormones, we have changes in what we call the HPA axis, that dysfunction. So that has to do with our hypothalamus and our pituitary and our brain, and then our adrenals for stress. Our body's undergone just a lot of stress with just delivering a baby in whatever form or fashion, whether it was a vaginal or a C-section. And the thyroid changes is also part of that. So again, the hypothalamus, the pituitary in our brain, and our thyroid also experience changes, okay? In the first trimester when we're pregnant, our body's pumping out that hormone called HCG in the amniotic sac to keep the baby growing, but also that will actually suppress our thyroid a little bit. And then as our estrogen is increasing throughout the pregnancy, that increases our thyroid hormone. So we get this kind of both sides of the pendulum, if you will, that HCG from babies suppressing, I should be specific, the TSH, the thyroid stimulating hormone, and then the estrogen is what's actually increasing the T3 and the T4 hormones. So that's what supports our brain health, brain development in baby, our bone health, our metabolism, things like that. So also that increase in progesterone and increase in estrogen, we talked about last episode, increases our Th2, which is kind of the protective factor on our in our immune system, that T helper 1 cells. And so when we have high Th2, we have lower Th1, and Th1 is what's often associated with autoimmune conditions, okay? But when we hit that cliff of a drop in our hormones and we lose a lot of that progesterone, because we don't, after delivery, babies on its own, and our body doesn't have to maintain that anymore. So that drastic drop in progesterone really plummets that Th2, and then that Th1 begins to rise. And so if things are not quite in balance, that can set us up and increase our risk for autoimmunity, specifically thyroiditis, because it's kind of the most common. So we're talking about is something like a Hashimoto's or Graves, okay? Hashimoto's is more if our thyroid function is on the low side, where it's not able to maintain those higher levels of thyroid hormone, the T4 and T3, because our estrogen has dropped, right? During pregnancy, our estrogen is what kept those T3 and T4 levels high. But now that our estrogen and our progesterone has dropped in postpartum, if our body can't kind of rebound, then we can have a little bit more of a hypo picture. Hypo often looks like the symptoms that we expect to see are things like fatigue, depression, weight gain, dry skin, constipation, insensitive to cold, right? Hair changes, hair loss, skin changes, dry skin, trouble healing, sometimes swelling in our extremities. These can also be common symptoms that we experience right after undergoing huge physical stress of delivering a baby or having surgery. So that's where sometimes some of these things can get kind of lost in the mix, because you're going to be tired. Sometimes when you have a newborn at home and you're not sleeping, you're going to be tired. So sometimes it's hard to kind of tease those things out. But I want to bring this to put it on the radar for women who are postpartum, because oftentimes, sometimes as moms, when we're trying to juggle a lot of things, or trying to be a good mom and like keep baby alive and happy and healthy, and oftentimes we don't always listen to our body, and sometimes we think, and we've been taught by conventional medicine that our body's going to undergo changes and we just kind of have to tough it out, right? It'll just bounce back on its own. Well, for some folks, we need a little extra support to kind of bounce back. And so, which we can do by altering that Th1, that Th2, giving you a little bit more thyroid support, addressing your hormones, so that when you have that drop in estrogen and progesterone, it doesn't completely bottom out, that it, is supposed to be this fluid change in hormones. Okay. On the other end of the spectrum, there are some women who may be more susceptible to Graves, which is a hyperactive thyroid. So sometimes our body can compensate too much, right? You get this huge plummet and this change of hormones, and you get this drop of estrogen and progesterone. And for some women, our body can bounce back, but sometimes we miscalculate and we bounce back off the charts. And so that can create a hyperthyroid situation, okay? So that can look like anxiety, that can look like irritability, high heart rate, weight loss, insomnia, insensitive to heat. We kind of feel like we might have some hot flashes even, right? These symptoms can also occur postpartum, as we're changing, right? That insomnia, we have trouble sleeping. Well, sometimes is it we have trouble sleeping, or is it because we're worried, about baby because we just brought baby home? Fatigue again, but that anxiety, irritability, that like worry, right? Are we worrying because we have a newborn, or are we worrying, because of thyroid issues? This irritability, this kind of the short fuse, easy to anger, kind of, nothing can make us happy kind of scenario. So a lot of those things can also be kind of swept off as postpartum. But I want to encourage you, if you know somebody, if you're experiencing the yourself, or if you know somebody who is in the postpartum phase. So we call that the fourth trimester, right? I don't know if you guys have heard that term before. So we have the third trimester as carrying baby after labor and delivery. We do in the maybe it's just the holistic world, I don't know, call that the fourth trimester. So it's usually that 3 months after baby is born. It's really important to focus on mom's health as well as baby's health. And so understanding that other things could be going on in the thyroid with our immune system when we have those big changes in our hormones, and being aware of that so that we don't brush that under the rug, or when we bring it up to our doctors, if we go to the OB, that they, listen, right? That you feel like you're being heard. Because in this country, we don't have great postpartum care. Other countries, when a woman delivers a baby, it's much like a woman warrior, right? Like you go through the most physical, strenuous test that your body's going to go through. And so there's going to be a lot of changes, right? In conventional medicine and in the Western world, oftentimes we don't have a very good understanding, I guess, of a lot of those changes. And so hopefully this will give you a little bit, some more tools, give you some more information to really advocate for yourself. Or if you're exhausted and tired, have a friend, a family member, a girlfriend, a parent, a co-parent, a partner advocate for you, right? To help you determine, yes, there's going to be some normal fluctuation, but if this is something that's continuing, like people, you may have heard stories of like, oh gosh, I've, never been well since my baby was born. And that baby may be 20 years old now. I ask this question often with folks, especially if they've got sleeping changes, or like if they're starting to look like they've got thyroid or hormone disorders. I ask back to, okay, what was your pregnancy like? What was it like after you delivered your babies? Because that influences us. Oftentimes, when we look at changes in women's health, and changes even on the other end of the spectrum when we go into menopause, right? We see hormone changes as well. We see those symptoms. We can see the insomnia, the fatigue. We can see irritability, right? Anxiety. We can see weight changes. We can see memory changes. So if people are experiencing that throughout a lot of their adulthood after they've had a baby, and if it wasn't treated, and then we move into menopause and it is just magnified, did we really support that woman with her hormones all the in-between times, right? So in Chinese medicine, we call that a yin deficiency. We see a lot of these symptoms as a sort of a deficient picture, right? Where, especially like if we're sensitive to temperatures, to hot or to cold, if we, have that anxiety, have that depression, if we don't have this like strong vital force. When we move into menopause, if people have the hot flashes, the irritability, again, the night sweats, they've got, changes happening in their body and it's pretty intense, that can lead to a yin deficiency as well. And so by making sure that we address those things, because I think sometimes it is common to have those symptoms, but when we have those symptoms and they're obstructing our quality of life, or they've been kind of brushed off as, oh, that's just normal, that's just a part of, being pregnant or having a baby, that may not always be the case. So that's really what I wanted to highlight today in this podcast, and really encourage, women who are in the postpartum, or if you know somebody who's in the postpartum who's struggling a little bit, not just with mood, because sometimes, we don't always see that, but if it seems like they're a little bit more, sluggish, or they're like describing symptoms that could be a thyroid change, or even just, a change in our hormones, I'm going to encourage you to get checked out, right? And if that means to advocate for yourself or have somebody advocate for you to get a thyroid panel run with your conventional doctor, or seek a holistic practitioner, or even midwives can oftentimes run labs in some areas. Request a thyroid panel, request a hormone panel. I'm a little bit picky because a blood hormone panel doesn't do a very good job. So try to look for a urine hormone panel, or a saliva hormone panel. There are some opportunities where you can self-pay or self-refer for some of these tests. So if you need help with those things, and you're having trouble finding them online, where you don't have to go through a doctor and you could just get the information and go through, you may not be able to go through all of it yourself, but you can get the information and then make an appointment with a practitioner, or with myself, or somebody who can actually go through and help you understand, right, what the changes are happening in your body and how that's translating to how you're feeling. But especially in the postpartum mom, I think that a lot of encouragement and support, I think, oftentimes isn't given. And this is a way to help you as a person, as a woman, as a mom, but also help baby, right? And help all, like if you have a family, and help all your kids, is that if we are balancing your hormones, if we're addressing any changes in the thyroid, in the immune system, and helping to balance out that estrogen, progesterone, that's going to make you a better mom, right? That's going to make you a better partner. That's going to make a healthier family overall. And so I just want to encourage that. Okay, I think that is all my notes. I just wanted to bring that up because a lot of when I was taking a continuing education class on the postpartum, and some of the statistics were a little bit shocking to me. Because when you think that 30% of women are affected, 25 for mood and anxiety disorders in the postpartum, and that can turn, and of that, I think there's still about another, I think it's 30 and 30% that can move into the chronic, right, where we develop anxiety and mood disorders. But it started because of those change in those hormones, right? Which the change in, I hope you guys are understanding me correctly, that change in that hormones, when you have that drop off of that estrogen, progesterone, that is totally natural, right? You've lost the placenta, the amniotic sac that was making a lot of those hormones. The lining of the uterus is changing after you deliver. So you expect that drop off of hormones, okay? It's how our body rebounds that's where we have to really look and support with things, because it's really putting your body to the test. So if you already had hormone imbalances before, or if maybe our liver wasn't functioning, 100%, or if our immune system was a little already had a tendency towards autoimmunity, that's where we need the support, is that so we don't drop off and then either overcorrect or we get stuck and we stay at the bottom of the cliff. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about balance and helping to support, women. Now, we still see these hormone changes, right, in women that are not postpartum as well. We all experience hormone changes every month, but it's very magnified, I think, in that postpartum mom, because you can see we can measure the changes in the first, or in the last trimester, before labor and delivery. We can measure hormones after labor and delivery, and then we can measure hormones in the fourth trimester, and we can see how things are changing. And so to better support women, to better support moms, better support family health, right, babies' health. So all right, I hope that helps. If you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. If you need help finding a resource in your area that works with postpartum moms or works with pregnancy, let us know. Yeah, and we can point you in the right direction. All right. Hope you guys have a good day.